Commission has completed the revision of voting district boundaries for both national and provincial elections. The process is also part of the Commission's work to increase voter access. There are now new districts and some have been disestablished. Granville Abrahams is Senior Manager in Electoral Operations at the IEC. He joins us now to tell us more about this and what it means for voters. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. So when we speak, Mr. Abrahams, about voting district boundaries, what are they in comparison to wards?
Yeah, now that's a very, very important question. And for this redelimitation exercise, the ward boundaries are not touched in any way. The ward boundaries also is the domain of the Municipal Demarcation Board, and that will only be re-looked at the next local government election. So for the redelimitation of voting districts, we are still operating within the ward boundaries as determined for the previous local government election. A voting district is essentially a planning unit for the IEC, and for voters, it is also a means of making voting more accessible and also manageable on the day. So if we can just compare, if we look at 1994, when we still have these images of these long snaking queues, we had about 14,000 voting districts then, and we now have about in excess of 23,000 voting districts, which means there are more places and more voting districts for voters to be able to access voting on voting day.
Does then that cover the why question that this needed to be done?
Yes. So we do this exercise ahead of each and every election, and we learn from what had happened. We must also realize that the country and the population is not static. So we may, for example, have new developments coming up. And this would lead to a number of people coming into an already established voting district, and those numbers could pose challenges on voting district. So that would be one reason, for example, to divide an existing voting district into two or more. We're also looking at voting districts where a portion of a community would be better served if they had to go to a voting station that would have been closer to them. So that is what we would do. But all in all, if we look at the exercise, the net effect is that it's less than 1% of our voting districts that we have added, even though there's a significant amount of them that are impacted because there are portions of some of these voting districts that would then move to another. But at the end of the day, the voters benefit, and it's also easier for the IEC to manage the voting process.
Okay, let's expand on the benefits for voters. Which provinces have been impacted, and what do voters need to know? So would somebody need to then re-register?
Yes, the provinces with the biggest contribution is KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, and Eastern Cape. So what has happened specifically in KwaZulu-Natal, where there's been a significant amount of realignment, is because on the ground, first and foremost, there's numbers that we need to attend to, and secondly, there's accessibility. And then, as I said previously, all of this contributes to providing easier access. So what's going to be happening, or what has already started happening for these voters that are affected, and it's not the entire voting district, it would only be a portion of the voting district. We have deployed for the entire month of October field workers that will go door to door for these specific portions of these voting districts that are affected, and re-register as far as possible all of those voters. Where a voter is not home, we will leave a pamphlet to inform them of the change and either invite them to come and do the necessary on the 18th and 19th of November when we are having a national registration weekend, Or alternatively, voters who have access to the internet and a device can do so 24/7, anytime, and go to our website and register or re-register online. And this also applies to any voter whose address may have changed, or even if they just want to check and correct their details, they may then do so online 24/7.
With the field agents that you have since deployed to go and explain what is happening to people, what do South Africans and in which provinces need to look out for? Because also you'll find opportunistic criminals who will then use this as a chance to gain entry into people's homes.
Yes, indeed. Well, first of all, if there's any doubt, then the local IEC office can be contacted. And we have all of our details on our website of all the local offices, just to validate that indeed we are busy in that area. Secondly, the officials will be having identity cards and a letter of appointment. And most importantly, they will be recognized by having our device, what we call our voter management device, which has the applications on there to re-register you. So there's a number of ways in which to validate that, in fact, that the field workers are indeed legitimate IEC employed.
Okay. You mentioned the national voter registration will be opened on the 18th and 19th of November 2023. What do South Africans need to know?
Yes. Well, first and foremost, as I've said, there's online registration is open 24/7. But on 18th, 19th, and November, we will be opening up all of our voting stations. So firstly, it will be an opportunity to register for those who haven't registered. Secondly, to re-register. And thirdly, most importantly, just to acquaint yourself with the location of your voting station, and then also we'll have a physical paper voters roll there, and you can then validate whether you are in fact on the voters roll, and if not, either check on the device that we have there, or then do the re-registration in the office.
Mr. Abrahams, I'm curious. We have been hearing a lot from some sectors of society, some leaders as well, banding about a notion that next year's election will be the biggest election since 1994. What does your data suggest, and what do people need to know about that? I guess this is a fact-checking moment, if you will, because to make that comparison, what would people need to, what kind of conclusion would they need to come down to? And so I guess essentially the question, is it a correct notion that next year's election will be something as big as what we saw in 1994?
Well, first of all, we want to assure South Africa that at all times when we plan an election, we plan for 100% turnout. Currently, the voters' roll is at 26 million voters. And we have seen over the years that there's been a steady decline, that the growth is not that high. And as a result of that, the registration gap has widened. And when I refer to the registration gap, then I'm specifically referring to those who are eligible versus those who are actually registered on the voters' roll. We're talking about anything of about 16 million South Africans who are not eligible. And if you weigh that against the amount of voters who turned out at the last local government election, where we only had 12 million, then for us it is significant that those who are unregistered, can make a big impact. And we obviously ready and prepared for South Africans to come out in their numbers. On the other hand, as well, there is this notion of a democratic recession internationally and not just in South Africa. But we hope to buck that trend.
Okay. Any closer to a date?
Any closer to?
An election date?
Well, the Electoral Commission has to plan for the earliest possible election. Now, the term of the national and provincial legislatures is determined by the Constitution, and that term is 5 years. On the other hand, however, the executive, the President of the Republic, has the responsibility to proclaim the election within a period of 90 days of the expiry of that 5-year term, and he has to do so in consultation with the Electoral Commission, obviously to assess our state of readiness. But we can only plan for the earliest possible date to allow the President with that prerogative to then make a proclamation for any day within that 90. So at this stage, we do not have any indication. We have ever had interactions with the presidency and have requested, that once the president has a date in mind, that before proclamation, that the country gets an indication so that everybody is prepared, whether it's political parties and voters, because as South Africans, we know we normally like to wake up at the last minute and then there's this rush. So I think it's important that we have an indication of an election date before the president actually proclaims. So we have made that appeal to the presidency.
Okay, because I noted your state of readiness on your website. You've also opened calls for observer applications. Who is eligible and what makes a person eligible to observe elections in South Africa?
Yes, we first and foremost, and there's I need to clarify that, because when we do open up and call for observers to register, then there is a notion that this is an employment opportunity and everybody starts sending the CVs. This is not an employment opportunity. This is for organizations to apply to observe the elections. The IEC cannot fund observers and therefore also not pay them. They have to fund themselves, because the whole idea of observers is that they need to bring credibility to the elections, observe the elections, and then submit their findings. If the IEC had funded them, they would not be independent. So we do, however, provide training. So any organization may apply and then obviously bring their own resources on board, but we can provide the necessary training. We have simplified the application process, as you've mentioned. There's an online application, so that will also expedite the process, the approval of observers. And we hope to have, specifically from civil society in South Africa, as many as possible.
Mm-hmm. So it's just civil society. So Amanda or Kosi cannot, as individuals, apply to be observers.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for your time this afternoon. Granville Abrahams is Senior Manager in Electoral Operations at the IEC. It's 12:30.